detectives, and welcome to video 3 of How to Catch a Star. And here are the worksheets. Now it might seem like there's a lot of worksheets here this week, but most of it is actually an explanation. There's not an awful lot for you to do, but some of it you've got to read, and I've got some videos, links that will help you understand as well. So we have our first page here, and it's how to catch a star with our word of the week, which is appear. So you can fill in our meaning, a synonym, an antonym, and use the word appear in a sentence. Then we get onto this, which looks quite complicated, but actually it's not. It's quite straightforward, but when you break it down to describe this, you realise it sounds more complicated than it is. We're going to have a look at comparative adjectives. So my example here, I've said, right, we know what adjectives are because we've been talking about those the last couple of weeks. So adjectives are words that describe nouns and they make sentences sound more interesting. So I might just say, Bob is a man. That is a sentence, but it's not very interesting, and we can't just really imagine anything about Bob. All we know is that he's a man. So if we want to make it more interesting, we add in our adjectives. So, for example, I've written in here, Bob is a tall, thin, intelligent, wise, funny, good man. So that has really given us a much better idea of what Bob is like. But that's just describing Bob on his own. What if we wanted to compare Bob to his friend Bill? So you could have Bob and Bill, and you might describe Bob. You might say, Bob is taller, thinner, more intelligent, wiser, funnier, and better than Bill. In that case, we've turned those adjectives into comparison adjectives, or what we call comparative adjectives, because we're comparing Bob to Bill. Now, what we needed to look at there is these adjectives have actually changed. So let's have a look how they've changed. The word tall has now become taller, thin has become thinner, funny has become funnier, intelligent hasn't become intelligenter, it's become more intelligent, wise has become wiser, good hasn't become gooder, good has become better. So what are the rules that these words have followed? Why are some of them just adding an ER and some of them have done some strange things? Look at the word funny, we've got rid of the Y and it's turned into an I. The word thin, now we have 2 letter ends. So what's the rules here? Let's have a look. Well, the first rule is that most of the words, you just add an ER. So tall would become taller, rich becomes richer, poor, poorer, cold, colder. So a lot of words, it's just an ER. And if in doubt, stick an ER on and you'll find out if you're right or not. But there is a difference. If your word ends in an E, like the word wise, you don't need to stick an ER on the end because that would make wiser. And that just doesn't look right, does it? So we don't bother adding an ER. All we need to do is add an R. So when you've got a word that ends in an E, like wise, safe, strange, or large, you just need to add an R on those words to make wiser, safer, stranger, and larger. Now there are some words where you have to double up this letter. And it's a little bit like when we looked at making a word into the continuous tense by adding ing. Some of those words we had to double the consonant. Now the rule is generally if you have a vowel there, a consonant, then a vowel, then a consonant. It's not a hard and fast rule, but that's the general idea. So you've got a word like thin, you've got consonant, vowel, consonant. So you need to double up the N. So thin becomes thinner with 2 N's. Now this is something that you're just going to get better and better at the more you read and the more you write. It'll get more and more familiar with you and you'll be able to tell which words you need to double the consonants with as you go along. But if you've got like consonant, vowel, consonant, that might be a word that you need to double the consonant on. So as I say, we've got thinner, bigger, hotter, fatter. Those consonants are all doubled. And then the fourth rule, it's a bit, again, like when we had the ing ending. If we have a word that ends in a Y, we change that Y to an I, because in English it looks a bit strange to have the word funnier. We tend not to have like a letter Y in the middle of a word like that, so that does look a bit strange. So the Y will be replaced by an I, and then we add the ER. So we've got funny-er, heavy-er, lonely-er, sillier. They all drop the Y, turn it into an I, and add ER. Then the rule 5, now this is when you've got a word that doesn't end in a Y, like lonely or whatever, or silly, but does have more than 2 syllables. In fact, I think it's 2 syllables or more. Again, this is something you'll just have to get used to as the more you read and the more you write, because it's sometimes hard to explain which words this applies to. But generally speaking, if your word has 2 or more syllables, you don't make it So we don't say intelligent All we do is we'll add the word more. So intelligent becomes more intelligent. Beautiful becomes more beautiful. Oh, there's a typo there. Ooh, I'll try and fix that before I send it to you guys. That should be becomes, okay. Interesting becomes more interesting, and ridiculous becomes more ridiculous. So in those cases, the actual adjective itself doesn't change. We're just adding in the word more. And then finally, rule 6, there are some words, and I think it's mainly just these 5 that I've got here, that don't follow any of the rules. When the word becomes a comparative, it changes to a completely different word altogether. So good becomes better. So bad becomes worse. So you would say, this boy is worse than that boy at spelling. You wouldn't say badder. Far becomes farther, or you can actually say further. Little becomes less, and many becomes more. Now, the main thing to remember as well, because this is something that a lot of people do by mistake, is if you are comparing 2 things, you could say apples are bigger than grapes. What you do not need to do is say apples are more bigger than grapes. That is not correct. It sounds clumsy, it just sounds wrong. So if you've already made that word into into a comparative adjective, so we've added the ER then, you do not need that more, okay? So that more does not need to be there. I'll give it a cross, okay? And also, this is another mistake that some people make as well. It's, for example, you say Bob is taller than Bill. You don't say Bob is taller than Bill. This is another mistake that commonly happens. So, based on all that, which sounds like a lot, but actually it really isn't, because you've been doing this a long time yourselves. You just probably may not have called it comparative adjectives, and we're just trying to explain it from a grammar point of view, but you will generally just know how to do this yourself. But what I'd like you to do now is turn these words into comparatives. So we've got fit, wide, happy, nice, friendly, deep, important, delicious, good, and big. So use those and look at the rules and see if you can turn them into comparative adjectives for me. Then what I'd like you to do is try and compare 2 objects using comparative adjectives. So for example, I've got Bob is bigger than Bill. So see if you can do something similar to that. Now, that is not all, because when you have adjectives comparing 2 or more things, you call it comparative. But actually, we can compare more than 2 things. So, for example, we could have Bill, Bob, and Bert. So we might say Bill is tall, Bert is taller, but Bob is the tallest. So what we're doing here is comparing not just Bill and Bert, but a third person, sorry, not just Bill and Bob, but a third person, Bert, which means you now compare one is tall, one is taller, and then we have somebody who is the tallest. So again, it's quite straightforward, although it doesn't sound it. We've now made a superlative adjective because we've compared 3 things and one of them is the tallest of all 3. Again, the rules to make these spellings are pretty much the same as the comparative rules. We add EST, but we always use the word the as well. So you wouldn't say Bob is tall, Bert is tall, but Bill is tall, Bert is tall, but Bob is tallest. You would say the tallest, because you can only have one that is the tallest. So like the rules before, you just add an EST onto here, okay? And then when we have a word that already ends in an E, we don't need to add another ES for the EST, so we wouldn't make wisest. Again, that would just look wrong. Nope, we don't need to add another E. We just need to add the ST. And again, if you've got words that are like thin and big, where it's a consonant, vowel, consonant, then you need to add, you need to double up that consonant. So thinner would become thinnest, bigger, biggest, hotter, hottest, and fatter, fattest. Rule 4. Again, you drop the Y and turn it into an I if the word ends in a Y, like funny, heavy, lonely, or silly. So they've all changed into a Y before you add the EST. And in these words, same typo. Dear, oh dear, I shall fix this when I send it out to you. Intelligent now, you would say the most intelligent. So these words are bigger than 2 syllables. So you don't bother saying the intelligentest, that just sounds wrong, or the beautifulest, they just sound wrong. You would change it to the most intelligent, the most beautiful, the most interesting, and the most ridiculous. And finally, those silly words that don't follow any of the rules. Good, we have good, better, best. Bad, we have bad, worst, the worst. Far, farther, the farthest. Little, less, and the least. Many, more, and the most. So, just remember, we still don't say the more tallest. That's a mistake some people say. You would say the most tallest. I'm sorry. You would say Bob is the tallest, not Bob is the most tallest. So you don't need, if you've changed the adjective, sorry about that, if you've changed the adjective from tall to tallest, or you've changed the actual word of the adjective, then you do not need these other words to make the comparison. Okay, so again, your turn here, just to have a look through and see if you can make those words into superlatives. And then see if you can put all 3 together, the comparative and the superlative on those words. And then finally, if you could write 2 sentences using superlatives to compare 2 objects. Now I'm aware that I've probably rattled through this quite quickly, but I'm aware that these videos I can only upload a certain time frame of video onto YouTube. So if you would like more explanations, please have a click. I will put these on the Google Classroom. They're just some fun videos. You don't need to watch them all, but they will explain this in a fun cartoon way. As I say, the explanation of this sounds more complicated than it actually is. So have a look on there, and I can reassure you it is not as complicated as you think. And then just very quickly, in fact, you know what? I'm going to finish it here and make another video to explain. I'll do one more. That was just, can you see any superlative adjectives on those 2 pages of the book there? So have a look and see if there's any superlative adjectives there. Now I'm going to stop this video here and do another one because I don't want it to go over the 15 minutes, or then I can't put it on YouTube. Okay, bye-bye.